TV appearance where we're going to talk about his book, which is fantastic, in a moment, If There Is No God. I'm telling you, this book is intriguing and compelling. But before we do that, Dennis, if you don't mind, if you could briefly tell us, because the public wants to know, the public loves you, what happened to you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mark, for having me, and it's a great honor to be with you. Okay, so briefly, and if you'd like me to expand on it, I will. November 12th, 2024, I stepped out of the shower in my home, and I slipped and fell backwards and hurt myself terribly. I damaged my spine, and I was supposed to die. The doctor at the hospital to which the ambulance took me said to my wife and one of my sons who was there, let's give your husband, Mrs. Prager, let's give him palliatives so that he dies with little pain. My wife didn't accept that verdict, got in touch with a doctor from the same hospital who happened to have been in Bolivia. The whole thing's a miracle. Make a long story short, I'm paralyzed from the shoulders down, and I have been working for the last 14 months on breathing. I'm not supposed to be able to breathe because of the phrenic nerve leading to the diaphragm. It doesn't even register. Every doctor who has commented on my ability to speak has called it a miracle, and none of them were religious. So that's the story in a nutshell.
In this book, If There Is No God, the battle over who defines good and evil. I can't think of a more important book right now, given the debates that are taking place, given some of the evil and the hatred that's out there aimed at certain individuals and religious faiths. And I want people to know the way this book is set up is he entertains questions from young people over a period of days where they're asking him very important questions about morality, God, faith, values, and Dennis answers them. And Dennis, what I'd like to do with you when we come back is to go through a few of these so America knows what's in the book and how important this book, the guidance, the moral guidance, the ethical guidance that you provide in this book is second to none. And I want to encourage you folks to get this book, If There Is No God, the battle over who defines good and evil. It's so brilliant. Dennis, you have a number of issues in this book that are raised with you by these young people. For instance, without God, what are values about? Aren't values relative? How do you answer that?
Right. Well, the definition of a value is something that is permanent and is above my feelings. If there is no God, and virtually every atheist philosopher acknowledges this, if there is no God, then morality is simply opinion. What you think is good for you. What I think is good for me. I mean, that's the honest approach. Only if there is a God is there an absolute in the moral universe. And that's not an argument that there is a God. I'm not making that argument. I'm making the argument that if there is no God, there is no such thing as good and evil. There's just opinion. The way I came to this is 50 years ago when I asked students, and I have been asking high school and college students this question for half a century. If your dog that you love and a stranger were both drowning, who would you save first? And for 50 years, virtually anywhere I've asked it, the same exact response. 1/3 said the stranger, 1/3 said their dog, and 1/3 found the question too difficult. 2/3 of Americans for 50 years would not save a human being whom they didn't know before the dog they loved. Meaning that emotion, not value, determined whom they would save. I would save, and I love my dogs, I would save a stranger because there is a value there. The human being is created in God's image, and dogs are not. And that's it.
How about this one? There is such a thing as too much religion? Is there such a thing as too much secularism?
Yeah, oh God, thank you. Thank you for choosing that one, Mark. Almost every student in America, going back to when I was at Columbia in the 1970s, believes the following: more people have been killed in the name of God than by anything else. Well, the fact is that the bloodiest century in human history was the 20th century, and it was the most secular century in history. Mao, Stalin, Hitler, these were not religious regimes. These were secular regimes. And they are the most monstrous in history. As Dostoevsky put it, where there is no God, all is permitted. So yeah, there is such thing as too much secularism.
Let me ask you this one in the book. Why does it have to be biblical values? Why can't it just be human values? I think you kind of touched on that in the first one, but still.
Yeah, I did. Absolutely right. I kind of touched on it. Why can't it be human values? Because what humans create, humans can take away. That is why the genius founders of America said that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. We're not endowed by the government. We're endowed by our Creator. If we're endowed by governments, then governments can take it away.
The book is If There Is No God, The Battle Over Who Defines Good and Evil. I encourage you to get it on Amazon.com. I really do. It's a fantastic book by a fantastic human being. Let me ask you this. Judeo-Christian values. Some people are saying, wait a minute. Christianity replaced Judaism. Everybody knows that. And yet we have a Bible that tells us that's not true.
I've been wondering this myself.
It's intellectually dishonest not to say Judeo-Christian. Without the Judeo, there is no Christianity. Jesus was a Jew, in fact, a religious Jew. The Gospels were written by Jews. The apostles were Jewish. The entire concept of the Messiah is Jewish. 2/3 of the Christian Bible is Jewish. It's unbelievable to me that there are Christians, and I have been the biggest offender of Christians who is not Christian that I know of for half a century. Let me explain, this is really important. No Judeo, no Christian. As I remind my Christian friends, Jesus never read the New Testament. He only read the Hebrew Bible, and he knew it rather well. This is the given, that without the Judeo, you don't have the Christian. And they need each other. I tell the Jews, my fellow Jews, without the Christian, the world wouldn't know about the Judeo. It's Christians who spread the Ten Commandments. And so the Jews got the Ten Commandments, and the Christians spread the Ten Commandments. We need each other. That's why I so adamantly believe in the term Judeo-Christian.
Coming up, you won't want to miss more from my conversation with Dennis Prager. Welcome back, America. As you just heard in the previous segment, in 2024, Dennis Prager suffered a terrible fall that left him paralyzed from the shoulders down. But that doesn't stop him, man, from continuing to fight for our country. A few months ago, I asked him where he gets this strength from. Go. I'm such a fan of his, and he's such a hero. And he's an inspiration to me and so many other people, and he's got a fantastic book, If There Is No God, The Battle Over Who Defines Good and Evil. This is a crucial, crucial book right now. You can get it at Amazon.com, and it's out in any major bookstore. Dennis, if I may, let's start this way. When we did our last interview last week, and we were done, I turned to the crew and I said, this is an amazing man because he not only wants to live, he wants to engage, he wants to be relevant, he's fighting for his country. Where do you get this energy from?
I have, since high school, had a sense of mission. I wrote in my diary in high school that I know what I want to do with my life, influence people to the good. Those were the words I wrote. That has never abandoned me. And that's what keeps me working, not to mention my family, my friends, people like you. I have so much to live for and work for. So for those who don't know, I had an accident a year and a half ago in which I became paralyzed from the shoulders down. That's a lot. But I am not depressed, and I am energized.
And you are remarkable. And thank God you're with us to show us by example what it means to live, and to live a full life. I want to get into your fantastic book, If There Is No God, and to remind people this comes from a several-day event you had with younger people who were posing really important questions to you. And the book is just so fabulous, the way you address this. So let us get started. For instance, should an atheist follow biblical values? That is a great question. How did you answer that?
Voltaire answered that. The French atheist of the Enlightenment. And he said, and I paraphrase, I don't believe in God, but I want everybody who works for me to believe in God. And it was a great line. And that's how I answer the question.
And what did he mean by that?
That he understood that for most people, the belief that there is a God who is the author of moral demands and a moral standard, meaning good and evil, people who believe that are more likely to be good and honorable.
Here's the next one. Why does God appear not to reward good and punish evil? I've been asked this question my entire life. Why is it that some people who are evil might live to their 90, and some people who are really good might die when they're 35 or 40 from some disease or accident?
Well, my answer is not I don't think it's the typical religious person's answer. My answer is God allows, for the most part, God allows life to proceed. He allows good and evil to exist. He allows luck, and this really drives a lot of religious people nuts. I don't believe that God engineered my fall, all right? And I think I've done a lot of good work for God in the course of my lifetime. But he allowed gravity to have its way. And that's the way it is. He allows bad people to do what they will do because of freedom. He has made human beings free, and he has allowed nature to have its way, as I said, with gravity. I do believe that there is an afterlife where good and evil are rewarded and punished. That's where things are evened out. That's what I believe.
More with the great Dennis Prager when we return. Prager, don't you think? He leads by example.
Absolutely.
His courage, his wisdom, his intelligence. Listen to what motivates him to keep going. Go. If there is no God, the battle over who defines good and evil. Dennis, one of the questions that was raised by a young person to you when you had this event, isn't eye for an eye unjust, they ask? What is your answer to that?
Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth was one of the great moral advances in human history. What it stated was the eye of a peasant is worth the same as an eye of a nobleman, that the poorest person's limbs were no less valuable than the richest person, than the limbs of the most powerful person. This was a brand new idea. It never, ever meant that if you knocked out somebody's eye, your eye was taken out. It never meant that. It meant an eye is worth an eye. A tooth is worth a tooth. A life is worth a life.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. So it's a real equality principle. That's life is a life. That's very, very important, very interesting.
Love it.
By the way, you had a piece in Wall Street Journal where you discussed at some length your situation and how you've approached it and so forth. Would you like to mention that, comment on that as well?
Yeah, thank you. I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal about my paralysis and the subject of happiness and love of life. I had written a book in 1998 called Happiness is a Serious Problem. And everything I wrote there prepared me for a calamity. Everything I wrote in that book. So my ideas about happiness have been vindicated. I'll never forget, about 25 years ago, a caller called my radio show. And I don't even know how the subject arose. But he said, you know, I'd rather be dead than quadriplegic. And it's very rare that I've ever yelled at a caller. But I yelled at the guy. I said, are you kidding? You have your mind and you have your ability to speak, and you would prefer to give up your life? What about your wife and children and perhaps grandchildren? What about your passions? What about your love of life in general? And unbelievably, I was put to the test.
Up next, a really great guy, my buddy Stephen A. Smith, who will join us with some poignant reflection on his life and the country. We'll be right back.